That is the outgoing mayor of the city of Cape Town, Patricia de Lille, speaking to my colleague Duduzile Ramela a bit earlier on. Back to the story now. President Cyril Ramaphosa has urged investors to partner with South Africa, even as the country emerges from what he calls a period of uncertainty and difficulty. He's opened the investment summit in Johannesburg, hoping to pump billions into the economy. ENCA's Devin Murugan is there and joins me now to take us through the events of the day. So, Devin, I suppose when a person like the president delivers a speech, applause is almost, something that is always expected. But I guess the applause that President Ramaphosa wanted was investors opening up their wallets, and it seems that has happened in a major way since the speech was delivered.
Well, indeed. Good afternoon, Tulis. Yeah, to put a number to that, 134 billion rand. That's what's been bandied upon the screens here. That's investment since this morning. You have the likes of Anglo-American, 70 billion some more. Vedanta above 20 billion. You have Mercedes-Benz coming in, another 10 billion. The key question is, to what extent does this money really manifest itself into broad-scale development and job creation? Remember, the president made the agenda today, and the agenda for South Africa at the moment, growth. We're in contraction at last measure. No company wants to put their money into a country or an economy that is contracting. So growth is at the center of it. We've just heard Moody's being unimpressed with some of those figures we've heard. But yet, as you say, there've still been some investments being announced here this afternoon, and it did receive applause. One of them being from a pharmaceutical company, Aspen. In fact, I've got the Aspen senior executive here, Stavros Nicolaou. He's with us. Stavros, thanks very much indeed for coming.
Thanks for having me, David.
So let's look at that figure. 3.4 billion rand investment. That's in some manufacturing compartment in pharmaceuticals. How do you navigate through all the noise and still say, I'm going to place this money in the country?
So, look, David, I think firstly, let me say that this is the single largest ever pharmaceutical investment in the country. So it obviously means we've got a fair measure of confidence in the country moving forward. I think what's given us some of that confidence is the direction that President Ramaphosa is navigating towards, or navigating forward on. And that positive sentiment realizes greater opportunities. But we also recognize, to answer your question directly, we also recognize that there are challenges. Probably the biggest challenge in our sector, in the pharmaceutical sector, because it's a highly regulated sector, is some of the regulatory obstacles and administrative burden. And what's given us a sense that we can cut down on the red tape in the sector is a new spirit of collaboration emerging, I believe, between the private and the public sector. And I think the President's gone to great lengths and been at great pains to elucidate on that, and that gives us confidence. So post this conference, and I've detected a vibrancy in this conference that I haven't seen for a long time in South Africa. So that's very positive in itself. But I think the most important thing is, once we leave this conference, are we able to sit down with government and work through some of these red tape issues? Because it's all about building globally competitive companies. So we can have another 10 or 20 Aspens in South Africa. That will be wonderful in the pharmaceutical sector. But you have to reward companies that are investing. And the best way to reward them is have policy certainty, predictability, and policy coherence. We're
going to get to that aspect of how the environment becomes fertile for investment. But let's just zone in on this 3.4 billion figure. Many at home sit and think, well, how does that figure really translate into actual job creation or expansion? Is that asking for too much to say, well, let's break that down?
So, look, I think the investment that we're making here is in a very niche, specific technology for anesthetic manufacturing. So right. Anesthetics are sterile products. They are amongst the most complex pharmaceutical technologies. And I think it's a massive feather in the cap of the country and Aspen that we're able to develop and embellish on that capability and capacity in the country. And in doing that, a number of down and upstream opportunities present in the country. So let me expand a little on that. First of all, pharmaceuticals are highly automated, so they're not massive labor absorptive, it's not a massively labor absorptive sector, but the benefits are the following. There's a number of downstream activities because you require clinical testing of these products, pharmaceutical testing. So labs that are based in South Africa will benefit from that, and those labs all employ South African people mainly. It also allows an opportunity for packaging, labeling, and inserts, all the what we call packaging material in South Africa. So these are small operators that start mushrooming around the Port Elizabeth precinct, right, which is where our plants are situated. So there's tremendous downstream opportunity here. And obviously, as you move up the technology and R&D value chain, then more and more opportunities start presenting.
You spoke earlier about a sustained form of investment, and when you have a sustained investment, it usually takes place under circumstances where investor confidence remains pretty constant, pretty secure, and for that to happen, a lot of messaging here needs to be alive even after the conference, as you say. What do we need to actually maintain or preserve that confidence beyond this conference?
So I think the first thing, we're building up a head of steam here, and it's important that we don't run out of steam. Not running out of steam means that there are formalized, institutionalized processes established post this conference between government and the private sector. So I continue, for example, in pharmaceuticals, there is a process that is being formalized in the presidency right now, under the leadership of Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, the Minister for Monitoring and Evaluating in the Presidency. I'm quite comfortable with that process that's embarking because it's going to identify what are specific issues. So, for example, the Drug Regulatory Agency in South Africa is called SAPRA. It's a new entity. It's come on board with massive challenges, and it's working through those challenges. And I must say they are engaging industry, so I'm encouraged by that. But we've got to look as a country and say, how do we reward current investors, presently investing, and how do we attract new investors? SAPRA, if they changed policy, for example, and said tomorrow, we're going to expedite registration for locally produced products, I think that's going to make would-be investors sit up and take notice. So formalizing processes moving forward so that you've got proper monitoring and evaluating, we're able to deliver on the action plans that we put forward. Very critical in the way forward.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. Stavros Nicolaou, Aspen Senior Executive. Thanks very much indeed for talking to us. So that's where we leave it. The picture that's painted is one, as you heard. The vibrancy is there. The numbers are here. I think that's a very important trait of today. Cyril Ramaphosa, the president, telling us at first when they came up with this idea, they were expecting about 400 delegates. It's now 1,050. So the appetite is there, just preserving that confidence and ensuring that that seeps through the economy and make the economy labor absorbing. Well, that's another page we have to turn to preserve it. Tulis.
Devin, just before I let you go, what Moody's has had to say about the medium-term budget policy statement being a credit negative budget, to what extent does it rain on the parade of the president today, having seen all those investment pledges and commitments, or is it just merely a reality check that says, while you're doing all this work, the reality remains until you change it?
I'm going to agree with the latter, and that's exactly what the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni, probably postured himself on when he delivered that budget on Wednesday. I mean, these numbers were transparent, they were straightforward. We have our debt approaching 60% to GDP. It's an awkward figure to us. We have our growth forecast half from 1.5% to 0.7%. Tito Mboweni holding nothing back, and I think Moody's was being equally transparent in saying this is a credit negative budget in terms of the numbers. But what's good is that the finance minister has been received as someone that's credible out there and someone that is being as transparent. So there's nothing hiding here. I think what's been identified is the fact that we are putting the numbers as they are and they're moving forward. As far as that having an effect on investors, I think there's a much more long-term approach that's taken by these investors than just one medium-term budget to this.
All right, thank you so much for that. That is Devin Murugan, part of the ENCA team, tracking that investment summit.